All right, here we go with another Misfit podcast, number 6. The bald, hairy dude before you is actually an award-winning. Huh? Okay,
No,
let
go
me
ahead.
finish
I
the
was just
introduction. Thank
laughing.
you. He's actually an
Sorry.
award-winning author. His name is Roger Stroklund. I'm told he wrote the books Nunya, A Guide to
Yep.
Surviving Alpha Company, and Dawkins Creek, No Need to Add Drama to Atheism. His other known book, not so famous, is Stages of Birth. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading my notes. I'm sorry. It is actually One Poop, Two Poop, Red Poop, Blue Poop, a story of diversity. How you doing, Roger? Welcome.
I'm doing good. I'm still recovering from the blue poop. That one, that took a lot. That took a lot,
Yeah.
and it opened my eyes to a lot of things in the world. The Smurfs, I see them in a whole new light now, and it is
Oh,
not a pretty light. It is terrifying. It really is. And but you learn to live. You learn to get past it.
which is good. I mean, there are always going to be the Gargamels in the world. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah, and you just do what you can.
Thank you for rolling with that nonsense. Roger did not write any of those 3 books, by the way. Those were fictitious. He used to now back in the day. Roger and I, we were in a battalion together. MC40. We're both Seabees. He was an equipment operator, right? Or were you a
Construction
mechanic?
mechanic.
Okay, he was a construction mechanic. He fixed the equipment, but you did go by the name Haas. Do you still do that?
Not in a few years. It's been a few
Oh,
years since then, but yeah, I used to. I used to. It was a nickname I actually got before the Navy, and then I was arguing with a friend of mine back home, and this was back in the days of payphones and phone cards, and like Jason and I happened to be standing next to me, and I was arguing with my friend. And I just said, "No, here, Jason, you tell her she's wrong." And he ended up talking to my friend Rachel from back home, and she ended up like, "Oh, Haas," and he was like, why am I just now hearing that this guy's name is Haas? What
yeah,
happened?" And so, yeah, Jason was the one who started sharing it out from there. So
nice. He was a
it
good guy.
stuck
I
and it
like
didn't.
Jason.
Oh yeah, he's doing good. I think he's back up in Oregon now. He's married, got his kids. Yeah, he's doing good. He's doing good.
So I almost said this before when we were doing the meet and greet. How you doing? I haven't seen you in years thing, but I started. I said no. I need to mention this when we're filming, and I don't know why, but I do find it ironic. We're having an episode about abortion. You're kind of more pro-choice. I'm pro-life, and you have a
Right.
pink tutu, a child's pink tutu. I thought that was ironic.
Yeah, that is so that was my daughter's, and now I've got another daughter coming in January. And
Oh.
when when you have kids, you just hold on to it, because you're probably going to need it again. Like,
Or your brother's
even
gonna
if you,
catch you for it.
yeah, it like I'm pretty sure we inherited that one. I bought a lot of little girl clothes. I don't know that I bought that one. I think that one's inherited.
Well,
That's
it's a
also the
good.
good thing if you have kids in your late 30s, early 40s. Medically, it's scarier, but the hand-me-downs are just so much better because
Well, I find it funny,
like
right?
all of your friends figured it out by now.
Right. Well, no, what I like is you could tell it's a girl's tutu because it's clean and not ripped. If it was boys' clothes, it'd be like grass stains everywhere and all nasty.
Oh yeah. You would just start with brown because it's going to end up that way anyways. Like
Right,
that's like realistically, yeah. Pink doesn't wouldn't stay pink for boys, and yeah.
right.
So
Did you ever hear that joke? Or not that I shouldn't say it. Oh man, I screwed it up. I was gonna say this the true story that happened in the Revolutionary War,
about
where
bring me my brown pants.
yeah. Well, so anyway,
Yeah.
nah, never mind. We lost it. Well, maybe
No,
I'll
no,
tell it in a Misfit
sorry,
minute down the
sorry, I
line.
didn't mean to ruin that for
No. That's
you.
my
Sorry.
fault. I should have said don't blow the. I knew you knew the joke. I knew you. We had the same sense of humor. There was no doubt in my mind that you probably told it
Right,
to
right.
me. You know what I mean? Like, so it's my fault. All you who
Hey,
never
man,
heard
hey,
the
man,
joke,
man.
Google it.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so
my
Roger.
favorite one.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
no,
Yeah, sorry.
please. Your favorite one is what? Tell us a joke.
Oh no, I actually one of my neighbors was trying to. He's like he's a he's an older gentleman, very conservative, and he was asking me about the military jokes, and like he was assuming that they were just like all dark and like like stuff that like normal people wouldn't laugh at. I was like, oh no, no, it's like there's actually a lot more thought put into it. And I told him the one about that we used to tell about the Marine Corps company that was like out on a
Oh,
march,
yeah,
or it was
right,
like a
right.
battalion, yeah.
They
And the
tricked
battalion
us.
commander, he sent a squad over. They tricked us, sir. There's two of them. And like,
Yeah.
I told him that when I like took him a second, he's like, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. I was like, that's a military joke. Like that's actually what military jokes about. So
Well,
yeah,
I
it's
find I got to be honest with you. I got to be honest with you for our all our viewers slash listeners. That is true. That is part of the humor where like they yeah, you can't beat me, and they send over squadron marines and they get Seabee ducks behind the hill and beats the crap out of them, and then
right,
he
right.
comes up and they send a platoon. The next thing the whole company, and then one guy staggers back. They tricked us, sir. There's not one Seabees. There's two. And but the other side is I didn't know. Like before I joined the military, I didn't know one dead baby joke. By the time I got out, I knew like I could fill an encyclopedia this thick with dead baby jokes. I mean, tell
Oh,
me
I
I'm
know,
lying.
I know. No, that was so. There was a story back in 2011. I contracted for a year in Afghanistan, and
Oh,
I
good
made
for you.
friends with
Well,
this
that's
guy.
scary, but good for you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it was a good paycheck, and I needed the
Yeah.
money. So, but there was an army guy that I made friends with that he was working as a gate guard at the camp that we were working out of, and it was really he told me the story about how he had been at a forward operations base just outside of Kandahar Airfield, and he was on camera duty in the mayor's cell. So instead of like having the pits like we always did on field exercises, they'll just set up cameras and we'll just have a guy just sit there and watch TV and just watch the cameras all the for like 8 hours. And he was watching the cameras and he sees this local dude just walking down the road, and like he doesn't know why, but he's just focusing on him. Like something tells him he's supposed to focus on this guy. The guy's walking along, and he trips over something. He goes back and he looks at it and he starts kicking at it and stomping on it, and suddenly it goes off. It was an IED, and he
Oh
set it
no.
off, and just like yeah. And my buddy just froze, and then it clicked in his head like, oh, that's why I was watching the guy, because he's the guy who planted it. Like I recognize that guy. I was watching the camera 3 days ago when he
Oh,
was changing his tire for like 3 hours. He was setting that device. We black routed, like we were waiting for EOD to come out and check that spot, and he ended up setting off his own device. And like the thing is that like I heard the story and like my military brain started laughing, and my buddy was
I
like,
don't mean to
"Oh,
like you say
oh
that,
yeah,
and I'm laughing because I know exactly what you're talking about. But this is a Catholic podcast, and I'm like, I shouldn't be
right."
laughing that people died. However, I mean, it's kind of our sense of
However,
humor. Yeah. Sorry about that if I offended anybody.
right, but like the first thing that popped in my mind was like this was the Maytag man. Like he was the IED repairman, and like he was best in the business. Really, I mean, and the thing is, like, there's people watching this who are just like turning this off right now. I know that,
Yeah, it's done.
but
We're
there's
over.
certain people like there's certain people who hear that joke and they're just like, oh my god, that's so sad, that's so true. Oh my god, like,
Yeah,
it's a really but like that's the humor that you develop, and like you
yeah.
kind of have to develop in order to understand it, in order to accept what you're
Hope.
seeing, you know.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
exactly. To
yeah.
stay sane, exactly, and that's what it is. So I don't remember. Were you with us when we went to the sandbox in '03? I want to say yes, but I don't remember you being there in
So
'03 the
in
first time. Where
uh,
that went?
so in NMCB 40, I did 3 deployments. My first one was to Guam. My second one was to Okinawa, and my third one was to San Clemente Island because we were uh, they had just changed the rotation because we were supposed to go Guam, Rota, Okinawa, and
Right,
instead we did Guam, Okinawa, Okinawa.
Okinawa. Yeah.
And for the second Okinawa deployment, I was sent to San Clemente Island
Ah.
with the tank road project out there. That's
Hi.
my wife. Eric
That's
says
okay.
hi.
Hi.
Oh, sorry. I love you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I was.
Oh no.
I was genuinely trying to say hi. I didn't know you were just on the
Oh
earpiece.
no, no. I've got my. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, well,
You're
when
okay.
you
You're
turned, I
okay.
saw that, and I was like, "Oh, that's why he said Eric said hi." Um, yeah, okay. So I
Sorry
didn't
about
think
that.
you were with us over there in '03, because
No,
that's
no.
when we got sent from Oki. We were there. Where were we supposed to go? We were supposed to do something, and then we got sent from there over there, and then
Oh, the air debt. The air debt.
yeah, the air debt there.
Yeah, I was air debt alpha. Like I was the air. I was part of the air debt that they stood up right after you guys shipped out
Oh, okay. Maybe that's
because
why I
they stood
remember
up
that.
a secondary air debt. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's yeah. I ended up staying in Okinawa, but yeah, I remember when they sent you guys out,
Yeah.
like you and yeah, there were quite a few other guys that fortunately still in touch with. So
Oh, good. Yeah, 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 yeah.
everybody
Same
came
here.
back. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
You know, I'm not going to tell a story, but anyway, we got to
oh
get going. I try to keep these to a
sure,
half
sure.
hour, but I haven't seen you in
Oh, sorry,
forever, man.
sorry.
I got out in '06. I don't think I've seen you
Right, right.
since. I've tracked you on Facebook, and that's about it. Okay, so
Yeah,
the
yeah.
topic was that
No, go ahead. I was just
I,
agreeing with you.
I like how I lean forward like we're actually having a conversation. Like, oh, I didn't hear you. What'd you say? When I should just turn up my freaking speakers. But I'm only like, oh yeah, would you whisper that again? Freaking moron. Okay, so we're the point here is Roger's a very good guy. I like him very much. I know he's got a great heart. He is pro-choice, but he is a logical thinker. We've had this whole thing came together. We had a direct message, a private message conversation about God, I think, and it was just very logical in a discussion without anger. We were, it's one of those unicorns, is what people call it. A Facebook unicorn, where you actually
Right,
happen to have a conversation and not scream and yell and go, "I'm done." Did you hear the pop? Please tell me you heard
right,
the
right.
pop. I smacked it. Did you?
Yeah, yeah,
No, I'll do it again. There, is that better?
yeah. There you
Mongo smash. No like talky words. Sorry, go
go.
ahead.
No,
You were
like
saying something
logical
important?
discussion.
Yeah.
No, no. It's but so in that conversation, I want to say it was Crash Course Philosophy. There was a playlist that PBS Digital Studios put
Oh
out
yeah.
that I had mentioned to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that I think it was John Green had explained was that I was kind of really that I always try and keep to heart if I'm having like an actual honest conversation with people is that I don't think it was Descartes. It was under Aristotle or one of the other older ones that basically a discussion should never be a battle and it should never be about winning. A discussion should actually lead to both interlocutors, both discussers actually, both of them winning because they're expanding their knowledge.
Yeah, that
And
sound like Aristotle.
yeah, and so it's basically what you're doing is you're keeping both to my mind you're basically keeping both interlocutors on the same team, and so they're looking out for the pitfalls for each other instead of doing this dishonest thing where oh well like you were mentioning before about like cherry picking or anything like that about doing this dishonest thing where you're not actually having a discussion, you're just trying to prove that the other person can't English like you do, and that does nothing,
Yeah.
that's useless. So like
Well,
and so it was good to actually have like a proper discussion about like not that we're both coming at it from the same side, but that we're not viewing each other as the problem.
right.
We're viewing we're both viewing the problem basically
Right. Right. Right.
and
Right. And
keeping that in mind.
we're
So
just searching for truth. That's the key to life, man. Is searching for
yeah,
truth. And I think that was very
right,
much Aristotle. Socrates was big on that too, but I think Aristotle was very more. Let's just stay here and figure it out.
right, right,
So okay, so in that note, I'm going to introduce the topic. It's not abortion. It's not we're going to discuss whether you're right or wrong. I think the fruit of the or this came from part of the conversation came out like, look, um, the argument seems to be at hand, not that you want to kill babies. You know what I mean like you're not going to walk into a
right.
nursery with a freaking M16 and just start mowing kids down. So I mean, if you did,
No,
I'd be calling freaking someone. You need to go to loony bin. So that's obviously not the case.
right,
So the question
right,
is it a child or is it a clump of cells? And I've never heard it discussed in terms that are more modern. Everything to me, all the discussions I've ever had with someone who's pro-choice is locked into the ideal of technology and biological research that we had in 1970. And I've said this several times. In
Right.
the 1950s, my body, my choice made sense. It was a logical argument. I can disagree with it, but at least it was logical. In the 60s and 70s,
Right.
same thing. My body, my choice. But I do think we need to have a discussion on okay, we know about DNA, we know about sonograms. What does that add to the conversation from the 50s and 60s and 70s? Does
Okay.
that sound about right? Does
I
that
do.
properly characterize our discussion?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah. So please go on.
Okay. I just wanted. I
Right.
just first of all,
Or
I just wanted to make sure we were both that was going on, and also to set it up for everyone who's listening. So
right. Right.
I guess I
Yeah.
just posed this question. I'm gonna pretend to be Socrates for a minute. I'm just gonna pose this question.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you think that DNA changes the discussion?
I It might change the discussion, but the question I always have with it is viewing and viewing an abortion as a loss of life is, I mean, for all the things that we haven't proven about or all the things that we have proven about a baby, about how a baby develops, about conception and everything, there are still so many more things that we don't know. And among those, first off, I would the term be the quickening, basically the point of ensoulment,
Okay, I
like
never heard it
when
called
the soul
quickening,
is
but yeah,
actually
when
attached.
yeah,
And that's one of the things that science has never that we still haven't found a quantifiable measure of the soul, or when a soul happens, when a soul occurs. And so yes, we do have DNA. Yes, we do have, and I understand where you're coming from with DNA, that at that point, if you're replicating cells, you're not talking about just the mother's DNA or just the father's DNA. You're talking about the chromosomes being taken from both and actually creating a new strain of DNA. The the thing that's always stuck with me, a long time ago, there was a documentary that I saw called Freakonomics, and one of
what
the
if I?
things that they
What's that
talked
about? I
about.
think I've seen it. What's it about?
So it's these guys who are economists, and what they tried doing was applying the lessons that they learned as economists to understanding different data sets that are viewed economically. And so one of them was they took a look at match rigging inside of the sumo world, and so like as far as sumo wrestlers,
I'm not
so
ignoring you. I'm
that
trying to find a pen to make sure I write this down because I want to watch it later.
no problem, no problem.
Go ahead. So sumo wrestling, Freakonomics.
Right. So they're like to basically say, okay, everybody's looking at sumo. Everybody who's aware of sumo wrestling is looking at it. It's 50-50. Maybe they're cheating, maybe they're not. But then when you look at the data from an economic standpoint, and you realize that the the ideal benefit, the situation that creates the most benefit for everybody is the situation that's always happening, then like when it should be 50-50, that hey, like either I'm going to come out ahead or you're going to come out ahead, it should be 50-50 that way, where in fact it's actually more like 80% both people come out ahead. That's really suspicious, and that actually points to the
That
game
doesn't.
rigging within sumo.
Yeah, that doesn't make
So
sense at all.
right, so the problem was that a traditional sumo match, if you enter it as a wrestler, you have 15 matches over the course of about 2 days. Now if you go into your 15th match as 7-7, and you come out of that as 8-7, you go up one half of the rank in the international sumo stand, and that one half of the rank is the difference between top ramen and steak for dinner, like
Really?
for the rest of the month. That
No
one
kidding.
half of a rank is that important. And so what happens with these guys is time and time again, you'll see somebody who's 7-7 going up against somebody who's 8-6, and they both come out 8-7, and they both go up half a rank. And then the next time those two guys see each other, it won't be the last match. And the guy who was 8-6 going into the match, he's going to win that next match, guaranteed every time. because
Wow.
he already did the favor to the guy the last time, and so now it's time to return that favor. And the thing is
Wow.
that sumo is so sacred. Like one of the things that they were talking
Yeah.
about
Oh, yeah.
is that
They're very serious about it. It's traditional, and there's a lot of ritual to it. That's why. Have you ever seen a
oh
sumo
yeah,
match?
yeah, I I love it because there's so many different aspects of I don't want to say Japanese culture, but of there's just so many different aspects of just the different cultures, like the mastering of the moment. Like because a match can take 30 minutes, a match can take 3 seconds. It's just mastering the exact moment that you're in, and then mastering the counter to that moment. Like it's amazing what they do, and like how none of these guys die from heart disease, like, because even though they're so huge, they're actually incredibly healthy. And then when they retire, that's the first thing is they have to cut weight, otherwise it's going to just turn into cholesterol. But it's a fascinating world that these guys live in,
I was just talking
and
about the initial before the match starts. There's it's like a whole production. It's like
right,
watching the London, what do they call it, the Queen's Guard changeover thing. Like it's amazing.
oh yeah, 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 it is. And like you have to purify the mat. Like I remember they have to throw salt on the mat to actually purify it ahead of time. It's a fascinating world, and the thing that they were discussing was that fascination that everybody has with it blindsides entire countries from the reality of actually what's going on there.
Okay.
And so basically back to the topic, that's many of the things that they were looking at, was just looking at things from an economic mindset and seeing where the benefit is
Yeah.
and who does benefit. And one of the things that they talked about was that in throughout the 1980s, basically 70s and 80s, violent crime rates just kept climbing, climbing, climbing. Right, every year just worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Right around 1990, it started to nosedive. And there's a couple of theories that have been attributed to this. And one of the things
There's
that
a
these
lot.
Freakonomic guys, well, yeah, there's a lot of theories to it. But one of the things that they noticed was that if you go back 20 years before that, roughly, I think it was 1974 actually. I'm trying to remember. I think Roe v. Wade was 1974. I think.
That sounds about right, but I mean, I have
Okay.
dyslexia and dyscalculia. Numbers get jumbled. I you could have said 1776 and
I,
been like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. It's not that bad, but I
but
mean,
the thing was that they noticed that in that the same year that Roe v. Wade was the ruling of the land here in the U.S., that was the same year that Nicolae Ceausescu took charge of Romania as basically as the dictator of Romania. So literally overnight in the U.S., uh, safe and legal and healthy abortion became the law of the land for every woman, right? Simultaneously, Nicolae Ceausescu, he wanted Romania to basically, I believe his goal was to actually make it the factory of Europe. And so he was actually taxing women for not having babies. And yeah, and so he developed all of these systems that were supposed to, no, you just have the baby, we'll take care of it, so that he could basically make workers. And and so basically you have these two completely different approaches, or these two completely different policies towards women's reproductive rights, and then 20 years later you see a sudden drop in crime, and then 20 years later you see Nicolae Ceausescu get dragged out of his house and shot. And there was no scientific link to it that they could find, but they noticed that correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. But one of the things that they were theorizing was that if you have a child that's born without even just a mother, without anybody there who just wants to be there for the child, who isn't there as a job to be there for the child, if you take all of that away from child, like the likelihood is you're going to breed that criminality. You're not going to breed it, you're going to raise that criminality. You're going from childhood, you're raising that criminality. And so that was the speculation, was that Roe v. Wade, you had to give it 20 years for those kids who would have been born as unwanted, for them not being born to be felt, because you had to wait about 18 years for them to reach adulthood. before they would actually be considered a violent adult to be sent to prison, then basically that that was basically the idea, was that Roe v. Wade, it kept criminals from being born because it kept unwanted babies from being born. Whereas the counter to that was Romania, where they wanted every unwanted baby that they could get because they just want to create labor, and all they ended up doing was creating violence. Now, there's a lot of other things. There's a great YouTuber by the name of Knowing Better. He's another veteran. He was an Army artillery veteran. And one of the things that he pointed out was that right about the time that Roe v. Wade happened was also the same time that we created the DEA, and that we also created that we also
that was going to be my response. And I mean, the crack
right.
cocaine epidemic really, I mean, if you don't know, I'm sorry, I'm just going to explain. If you don't know the
Go ahead.
depth of the crack cocaine epidemic and what it wreaked on society, was insane. Both
Yeah.
in high and low power, high economics structures. You know, the upper class and down to lower class, middle class. It destroyed everybody. And I would also add that not only the
Yeah.
DEA, but I would also say in the '90s is when they started implementing things like stop and frisk. Like, I'm not advocating for that, but what I'm saying is, though, they toughened up on crime big time from the '85 to the '90s, and I think that created a whole new issue that we're not going to talk about. But I mean, yeah, drugs, I think, had a very big impact on that, and our response to the drug
But
thing too.
the thing is that prior to the DEA, drugs, basically possession, period, was just considered more or less like a misdemeanor, like a parking ticket. It was considered
Yeah,
contraband. Hey, you can't have that, and that's how it was treated. It wasn't treated like you were a violent criminal. And so, one of the things that he points to, that Knowing Better pointed out in his video, was that it wasn't that we were making more criminals, or it wasn't that more criminals were naturally happening. It was that we were making more things a criminal act. And so, basically, if I like you take a look at prohibition, right? Now
right, 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 right. I see what you're saying.
you have entire criminal empires that are built off of filling this need for alcohol. You're building entire criminal empires. Once you make the alcohol legal, it all goes away. Or, I mean, it doesn't all go away. It needs to find another revenue source, but it's not going to be nearly as strong as that alcohol was. And that's
Right.
kind of the same thing that they did with drugs, was that by making the drugs illegal, they suddenly decided, hey, now you're a criminal. And
I
that's where that that's one of the because before that it was treated as contraband, and if you were strung out on heroin, you had a public health system that you could rely on to get you off of it. And
I
so
I was going to say,
go
I
sorry, go
cannot.
ahead.
I'd like to direct us back mainly because I cannot speak intelligently or even incoherently on that subject. I mean, I can, but I know from like '80s on. That time I didn't mean to smack the thing. From the '80s on, I understand how the drug, how what we did with drugs. But before the '80s, I have
Right.
no idea. So I can't speak intelligently on it. But if I can reel this
Well,
in, okay, go ahead, make your point, and then I'll reel this in.
right.
Go ahead.
So the
Very good.
reason I said that was to point out that the argument that the Freakonomics guys came up with, it isn't the end all be all argument.
Oh,
It's one possible solution, but one of the things that they posited in that always kind of stuck with me was, if since like we don't know when that ensoulment point happens, when a child, when a fetus is developing, we, can we consider it murder, or is it even, I mean, we can't even confirm that it's not just postponement of a life. So in that point, if it is, like, let's say I was a 19-year-old girl who had an abortion, and now 16 years later I'm 35 and I'm with my husband, and now I find out I'm pregnant. Who's to say that it's not that same soul? That, I mean, if we're considering it murder, it's because we're taking a life. Who's to say that it's not that same life?
I
We
don't
we, we
understand
can't
your argument.
verify that. We can't. So
Talking about
basically,
like reincarnation.
the
Like, how do we know the soul that I
no,
killed?
no, not, but it's not necessarily reincarnation, but we're saying that it's murder, but like I understand the argument that okay, abortion is murder. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is just putting that on hold. And maybe it could be murder if, let's say, a woman does get an abortion and she grows up and she lives her whole life and she never conceives and has a baby. Then yeah, then it might be murder. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just putting that. Maybe it's just saying not right now. Maybe it's
Right.
just waiting to have. Maybe it's just waiting to have that kid. And we can't quantify any of this scientifically yet. We can't quantify the ensoulment. We can't quantify if a soul is transferable. We can't even quantify a soul. Period. We can't. We I know that there's been attempts. The guy who weighed dying people, I remember
Oh,
like
that's
that
right.
was like back in
He
like
tried to see how much the soul weighed when it left the body, and he actually got some kind of figures, didn't he? Like he studied, he actually got that the soul weighs something.
there were some figures, but the problem is, especially with the methodology at the time, like basically it was like a stethoscope, and then he had a guy on he had a scale like from the year 1900 because it was like 1901, and not all that accurate. And like he's trying to measure grams, and like this thing's meant for measuring cattle, and like and and then like he also has to figure out like okay, when is the dude dead? And so like he's got like if I remember right, he had a stethoscope like tied to this dying guy's chest who's like wheezing and just trying to get a breath, and he's like, "Can you keep it down?" Like listening,
Okay.
trying to hear a heartbeat. Like,
Well,
can you
first,
die quietly, please? I'm trying to listen.
okay. So first of all, when you say these giant scales that are inaccurate, all I think of is Monty Python and the Holy Grail with she's a duck, and if she weighs the same as a duck. Okay, but but does the question okay, so we don't know where the soul point is, and not everybody believes in a soul. Science would say sometimes souls don't exist. Aristotle will say that every little thing, every living thing has a soul, including the blade of grass. Um, I don't know if you know, I don't if I'm mansplaining to you, is it okay?
No,
Can you
yeah, go
mansplain to
ahead.
another man? Um, no, Aristotle would say that anything so the soul means the animus, it's the animating force. In Latin it's the animus. um it's what animates something, it's what allows it to live. So the difference between so like the Aristotle used the example of, let's say, a flower, and the moment the flower dies is the moment it starts to death. Starts This moment the soul leaves the flower, it begins to decay, right? And we know this when
Right,
when someone dies, their soul, their body no longer replicates cells. So with DNA, and we know that as soon as the sperm hits the ovum, cells begin to replicate. That is signs of
right,
life. And if we were going to go by Aristotle, I think we could say that that means that it has a soul at that point. But once again, that's philosophical. That's not scientific. However, I mean, I think it points to something. I mean, well, of course, I'm an Aristotle fanatic. I mean, what do you think of that? So
right.
DNA hits the sperm meets ovum, new DNA, cells replicate. What do we? I mean, does the advent of that teach us anything? Advent? I don't even know what that
You
means.
see, that's hard.
That's a word I'm copying from somebody. Does that phrase mean
No,
anything?
no,
Let me apply it to the subject.
no. I do understand what you're saying because at that point you're replicating something new. You're
Yeah.
replicating essentially something prime, something that hasn't been there before. And yes, but at the same time, I mean, isn't that I'm not as a father of two, I would never mean to compare children to cancer, but isn't cancer effectively a replication of a new stream of DNA? Because it's a mutation, which means that it's no longer replicating in support of the host life form. Which, just like a baby, when an egg is inseminated, it's no though the egg and the sperm are they're no longer representative of the father and the mother. Basically, at that point, they are if they're replicating their own DNA. A cancerous cell is doing the same thing if it's continuing to replicate that mutation and to creating a tumor. And I mean,
Well, once again, I can't speak intelligently on this. I don't know. I mean, it does. If the cells have new DNA, I think you have a strong argument. If they, I think as I understand cancer, and like I said, I've never read any research into the DNA changing, but as I understand cancer, it is a mutation. You're 100%, it is a mutation, but isn't it like, it's a mutation in the fact where it's no longer replicating liver cells, it's replicating a different kind of cell, right? It's no
Right.
longer the liver,
However,
it's no longer liver, it's an abnormal liver cell, but I don't know if it has the same DNA. That's an interesting question. I have no idea the answer to. I was trying to clarify
well, and
for our
that's
listeners that, you know what I'm saying? Like, I
right,
don't know.
right. And I might be like I'm an IT guy. I'm not a
Right.
yeah. I'm not a doctor by any means, but that's one of the problems is that scientifically defining life period. I mean, you and I can both agree that we're alive, but scientifically quantifying is actually it's pretty hard because when you start hardline defining it, then you start wondering about certain other things. If could you make an argument for rust? Okay, no, you can't. That's a simple chemical reaction. There's no, it's a natural reaction that doesn't require any animus, as you're talking. Well, it does. No, yeah, it
No,
does.
but it's not alive. It's not alive. It's not Rust doesn't
Yeah, yeah,
replicate cells. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
right. But okay, so let's like one of the classic ones, fire. Uh, it doesn't produce cells, but it does replicate itself. It does consume. It does take energy to create. It literally burns energy. I mean, can you consider fire life? And no, we probably wouldn't consider fire. But the thing is that it's a very blurry line between what isn't life and what is life, and it's that way with. I mean, it's that way with everything. Unfortunately, I mean, if you take a look at, there was a video from I want to say his name was Simon Dan, and he actually went through the fossil record that we've seen from the land animal that whales and porpoises and dolphins all came from, down to the modern whale and dolphin, and somebody was saying, can you possibly imagine that this could turn into this? And he's like, okay, these are the individual fossils that we found in that chain. And can you imagine that this turns into this? Yeah.
Right.
And then this. Yeah. And
Right.
then this. Yeah. And then, you're doing this over the span of millions of years. But the thing is you're, because of, I don't want to say, I don't want to say ignorance, but it kind of is because of the scientific ignorance that a lot of us do have, myself included. We have this expectation that no, this is specifically this, and this is specifically this, and then we have this lizard brain moment where we say this turned into this, when no, actually, it was just a genetic trend that shaped this creature into this. Over generations of slight, minute changes that are practically imperceptible. And that's the problem with anything scientific is that you're not going you're going to find truth, but at the same time you're not going to find the truth that you're looking for. And I guess the easiest way for me to explain it is that you can either define exactly where something is or where something's going. If you can perfectly define where something is, you have no input on where it's going. If you can perfectly design the vector that something is traveling on, you have no way of knowing where it is at any one moment.
I have
Uh,
no idea what you just said.
okay, so if I take a picture of a particle of sand that's falling through the air,
Yes.
okay, and I take like that picture kicked off in one millionth of a second, so that grain of sand is just not blurry at all; it's just perfectly sitting in the air, and you can't tell which way is up. I spin the picture. Can you see where
Oh,
that
okay.
grain? Can you tell me where that grain of sand is going?
No, no, not at
No.
all.
But if I slow it down to 1/100th of a second and you see a blur, now you can tell me where that
Hmm.
grain of sand is going. It's going this way. Can you tell me where it is? It's somewhere on that little bit of line, but you can't tell me exactly where it is
Oh,
on
because
that
it's not a
line in
clear
that moment.
picture. You know it's there somewhere.
Yeah,
Well, it can't be where it's not.
right,
Meaning,
right,
if you
but
see the line, it's no longer there. And once
right,
again,
right.
talking about Spaceballs, we're in now. When will then be now? Soon, right?
Soon, sir, soon.
Yeah. Is that not?
But
I mean, it's comical, but I mean, it's kind of like you
yeah,
can't
no,
really.
it's exactly right. Yeah, you. like you can't be now, and
Mhm.
I mean that's another example of, for all the things that science can do for us, we have this kind of basic misunderstanding that we expect so much of science, when the fact is that it's an accumulation of data that we can use to make predictions. And when those predictions fail, we find ways of determining why those failures happen, and we reconfigure our equations to find out how we can adjust for that problem later, and then we make a better theory. We make a better, that's how you make a theory, basically.
Right.
And but the thing is that all of these things that we're talking about, whether we're talking about teaching evolution in school, whether we're talking about reproductive rights, it it claims a hard and fast line that science can't provide, and it's also demanding that, like I said, it's demanding that we identify things that we can't even really quantify yet, that we can't quantify when that life actually is its own life.
Okay. I was going to ask this
I
question
know that
at
it's
the end.
creating its own DNA, but
Well,
go
no. Well,
ahead.
I mean, it had nothing to do with that. Actually, this was an existential question I was going to ask, and I was going to ask it at the end, but because you're talking about this, I think now's a good time to ask it. Which is, okay, if you can't quantify when it has a soul, I got an echo for some reason coming on my end, so it's funny. So if you can't quantify when it does have a soul, you can't quantify when it doesn't. So my existential question was going to be at the end of all this, after we just, and hopefully we have time to get to the sonogram stuff. But would it be more prudent to err on the side of life, decide that it probably, that it could have the soul, than to say, like, if you ask me, how can I explain? Would be a good
I understand
example.
what you're
Like,
saying.
would I rather, what I'm saying? Like, it seems prudent to err that
Like,
assume that it is life instead of, you know what I mean, until it can be proven that it's not. I guess.
right. No, I do understand what you're saying, but also at the same time, you're discount or at what point are you just ignoring the lives that are already involved in this? At what point are you ignoring everything about the person who's carrying that child over the possibility of that child? And I I I feel really bad about this because I always forget this woman's name, but she actually, in the 70s, she actually came up with an analogy. You probably heard this one before. You might know the name of the woman who came up with it. But basically, she said, imagine that, like myself, I'm almost 40. I'm almost at the colonoscopy age. And let's say I went in for a colonoscopy and the doctor said, hey, you've got a really creepy butthole. I need to put you under, because to get the camera in there. And so he puts me under anesthesia, and I wake up and I can't move. And like I try and turn my head, and there's something here, and like I'm freaking out because my body doesn't feel like it's my own. What the heck is going on? And the doctor comes in, he says, "Okay, Mr. Strokeland, I'm really sorry, but here's the situation. While you were under, ambulance came in. The world's best cello player ever was in a debilitating accident. Okay, like their they got their pelvis run over by a semi truck. They are just a liver, some lungs, a stomach, and a brain, and that's all that they are right now, and a heart. And we're working on, we had to find a way to stabilize them in order to buy time to find a way to sustain their life. And all we need is 9 months. All we need is for them to stay hooked up to you for 9 months. When does, this isn't going to kill you, or this isn't going to kill me, but at the same time, do I have a right to say, hey, why, what say do I have in any of this? That this, even if it wasn't forced upon me, even if I just had, let's say, even if I just had an organ donor stamp on my license, and that was the justification that was used to force my body to be basically the living dialysis for another person, at what point at what point, where exactly is that line that my rights didn't matter anymore, and that this person's rights were all that mattered? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. If I can get a second, I've never actually heard this analogy. It's a good one. It's a more dignified than the parasite analogy, which I appreciate because I hate the parasite analogy. Because guess what? You're
No,
a parasite. I'm a parasite. We're all parasites. We're all living off of something else. Look at the dictionary. So I
right.
appreciate this one. This is a more advanced argument of the parasite. So I'm not as prepared to handle this as I thought. But if I can restate it, basically, you're saying you're comparing the the celloist that needs essentially, let's just call it a constant blood transfusion where you're just using, just circling around whatever it is, right? So you need to stay up and
Needs my
hooked up to
body
this
to
guy.
support his life.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. However it works, where it goes through your kidneys, your liver, everything, and then filters out and goes back to him. Is that kind of what you're saying, essentially?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
forcing
It's
another person to be
basically,
that
yeah.
filtration, almost like an umbilical cord for another person. Let's just say that you have two 30-year-old people,
Yeah.
and one is forced to be connected through tubes and is essentially an umbilical cord, and you're sustaining the other person. Would that be a good
Right. And
example? Oh man, shut up.
that's a good analogy, but the key thing to remember with it is that you can make a logical argument that forcing that on me, that's not the bad call, because of the
Well,
fact that you're holding life sacred above all else, and that is admirable. That really, I mean, there's so much action that we take in the world specifically because we hold life sacred. But at the same time, would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with waking up from just a standard surgery, and because you were willing to be an organ donor, now some guy is now some other person is forced upon you for you to take care of for the next 9 months, or even, and that was the example that was given. They said, okay, what if after those 9 months, let's say that for some reason, okay, they can be separated from you. However, let's say that by that point, they came to rely on your blood type. Your specific, there's something specific about your blood type. And so now they need transfusions for the next 18 years. Like at what point would I get any of my rights back? And that's just the continuation of the analogy that the woman gave. And like I said, I feel horrible for forgetting her name. But that was one of the really interesting arguments that I'd heard. There's a British YouTuber by the name of, his channel's Philosophy Tube, and he actually did a really great. He's a young British actor who has a degree in philosophy. They do the British degree system different over there, and he
Right, they do.
started doing
It's all
this to make
Europe.
money while.
We're different than all of Europe. Like if your degree system, if you're getting a degree in Europe and you try to come here, it is insane. Like they're like, I no compute makes sense. I think you need to start over
Yeah,
again. Yeah, it's crazy.
but that's the thing, is like he's trying to, like, basically this is him. I think it's him trying to make his B roll or whatever, or like his casting role. So, like,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
when he
just
goes to castings, he can say, "This is what I've done
yeah.
before." But at the same time, he's also using the degree that he got from college as his philosophy degree. So he's making a lot. He makes a lot of really great content. And he actually made a video, basically pushing this scenario onto a Ben Shapiro type, specifically because, for one, Ben Shapiro is extremely anti-abortion, but also at the same time, he is actually a really good violinist.
Can we? Can we? Can
And
we?
that,
Can we? I would just appreciate if we could we stick with pro life, pro choice. Is that okay? I think getting that kind of gets into the negative. You know what I mean?
okay,
Like, because he's not against the act of abortion. He's against the killing of what I mean. Like, he's he's pro. He wants life, just like you're not. It'd be like me saying I really wanted to go in this and make sure I never say this, but like it was always on my mind to say you're anti-life. No, you're not anti-life. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather
right.
say the positive. I know it's semantics, but hey,
No,
man,
I understand what you're
peace,
saying.
love, and chicken grease. Love, peace, chicken grease, man. Let's just all be happy. Here
Uh,
in California, you know how it
no, it
is.
was, well, no, it was Mother Teresa. Actually, it was one of the really great points that she made, was that she would never go to an anti-war rally because the focus is war. But if you throw a peace rally, she would gladly speak at
Gotcha.
whatever point
Okay.
you wanted her to.
Well, she was much holier than I, and I just, it, yes. I'll take that. Well, thank you. That's a more eloquent way of putting it. Yes, good.
Well, so like I said, as a Unitarian
Yeah,
Universalist, we always look for good messages, and I always thought that was a really good message.
yeah,
Be for something rather than against. So
yeah.
it's a
Right.
good point that you make.
Thank you, sir.
So, but the thing was that he kind of pushed it towards a Ben Shapiro type of
Hmm.
person. He also kind of forced that because of Ben Shapiro's history as a violinist. He's actually a fantastic violinist, and his sister is actually like a very highly accredited operatic singer, if I remember right. But that was one of the reasons why he directed it so specifically at a Ben Shapiro type was he always whenever he makes videos like this, he's done videos about Steve Bannon, about about other characters. He specifically says like, I really hope that this person does see this, and that was him actually trying to like, if Ben Shapiro actually does see this, would to make it that much more appreciable for him that he could appreciate the situation would be to like, this is somebody that you would actually look up to. This is somebody that you would have studied,
Did he
and
respond?
now no, I don't know that he ever saw the video, but that's it's a fantastic video. But that was he puts the argument a lot better than I do. He takes, I believe it's like about 45 minutes to go over all the ins and outs of it and everything.
Okay, I'm gonna cut us off right now on
Sorry,
this
go ahead.
tangent real quick because I do want to get to I do know more words than sonograms, but I will say this. I will say
Sonograms.
this. I wrote it down. I drew a figure. I'm going to think about this. This is, I mean, I honestly think that's just a just as valid a philosophical point as the other one. Is like, are we obligated to err towards the side of life as opposed to err towards the side of, well, let's just, I mean, leave it up to the person. I think they're both very
Yeah,
philosophical points. Um,
yeah.
Sonograms. Okay, so we don't
Go
know
ahead.
when life begins. However, we know sonograms, we can see babies moving. I'm going to call them babies. You would call them fetuses. That's okay. That's a stage of development. I'm assuming you'd call them fetuses. I don't want to speak for you.
No, yeah,
So,
there might be a more granular term, but fetuses. Go ahead.
I mean, it's a stage of human development, right? I mean, it's a
Right,
scientific
right,
term.
exactly.
So I hope you wouldn't be against it.
Right.
All right. So, but we also know, right? We can see them moving, and even in abortions, there was a doctor in the 1980s, late 1980s. He was one of the key figures. I forget his name, and that's because, well, I can't remember names. So don't feel bad when you said that woman, that poor woman. I forget her name with her analogy. Don't worry, I forgot this dude's name too. He was one of the three key figures in the Roe v. Wade case, and he actually did a sonogram as he performed abortion. He filmed it and he called it the silent scream, and you can see the child's mouth opening and closing, like screaming as the abortion is taking place. So, once again, the question being, does that add anything to our conversation from the 60s, 70s, and 80s with new biological and technological breakthroughs?
Well, I do understand I do understand the point that you're making, and I do understand. I do appreciate that it's compelling. And the problem is that I have a response to this. However, I don't want it to sound at all like I'm minimizing what you're saying.
Okay, timesies.
But
Timesies, real quick. Timesies, real
okay,
quick. For
okay,
all those out there, because I know where Roger's coming from. He's using his brain, not his heart, which is good. So if you're offended by what he's about to say, if I'm offended by whatever I'm trying to say, just know, or what he's trying to say, not what I'm trying to say. Oh, I should say it too. If you're watching this and you're a freaking dirty hippie liberal in California who's supporting Roger, if I offend anything you say, sorry. But he's come. Would it be fair to say whatever you're about to say is coming from your head, not your heart? You're not trying to
correct.
demonize anybody. You're not trying to. You don't want it to come across negative, but people could take it negative. And
Right,
if they
right,
do, that's
right,
not your intent. That be safe to say?
right.
Okay,
Correct.
go ahead,
Yes.
please.
So the reason I mentioned this was because this actually happened this morning.
Oh
There,
wow.
I used to be a mechanic, and I'm always watching mechanic shows, and there's always like I always notice just like really weird things that nobody ever mentions. And one thing in particular, there was this show where these guys were basic. They had all the body panels from this company that I think it's Original Parts Group is the name of the company. And what they actually do is they go out and they get licensed approval from car manufacturers to reproduce literally every part of one specific year of a
Okay.
car. So, like a '67 Chevy Nova, no matter what part is broken on it, these guys will make a replacement for it. And basically, they had all the body panels to rebuild a Ford Bronco. And there was something really interesting I saw when they did that. And when you assemble body panels like that, what you're talking about is something called pinch welding, where you're not actually introducing like any filler material. You're just squeezing the two metals together. You're passing current through it to heat it so that they'll bond together.
Oh yeah, that's like it's like a more high tech. What do they? Oh fudge! I know. I've seen it on a grander scale, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Right, right. Like if you ever see footage of an automotive assembly line and you'll see like the little arms come out and you'll see like sparks come out and then the
Yeah.
arm moves over. That's what
Oh
it's
yeah,
doing is
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
pinch welding.
Times. I
Yeah,
gotta call times
and
these again. Uh, I also what came to mind was if you ever seen the show Futurama, and they're like prehistoric, or like our robot ancestors making cars, and they got like clubs and they go boom, 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 boom. Sorry, go ahead. You ever seen that one where it's like the simulator's moving and there's
I
early robots and they're just beating them with clubs?
I I love Futurama so much. It's such a
So
great
much,
show.
so much.
So
All
good.
right, go ahead. Sorry. So
Uh,
the pinch welding.
but so they were demonstrating that so pinch weld it's this the actual pinch welder is this
Mhm.
giant device, but there's actually like they were showing, and if you buy this special kit, it doesn't just come with this one, it also comes with this feature where you can bolt the negative lead directly to the material, and then you just have this pinch gun that you can go around and do the welds with. And they were demonstrating it, and the thing was that like if you don't know what you're seeing, you don't realize that you see the guy come up and he's like up here and he pushes and ding, and you see sparks, but then you see the negative lead that he has bolted to it go and it actually curves out. And
Right,
that's because the current is passing through it and actually
right,
causing it to animate itself, which is really fascinating because you would expect that to be somebody slapping the cable or like a gust of wind or something like that. This is literally just a flow of electrons causing it to coil up and causing it to
right.
bend that way. And
Well,
we
to
that
be fair, electric current does that with a lot of things. Like, I mean,
exactly,
you
and
do
that
that, and you can
was
see the ripples as it goes.
right, and that was I want to say that was one of the inspirations for Mary Shelley when she wrote Frankenstein was that there actually was a I don't know if he'd be considered a pathologist, but there was a I want to say he was a British doctor who believed that he was on the path to reanimation, and that's what he was
Yes,
doing was he was taking
yes,
cadavers and actually passing current through individual muscles.
I've
And
heard of this.
the problem like while I do understand the art where that doctor's coming from with I'm sorry you said the scream of death
It's
or
called the silent scream because you can't hear it.
the
So
silent
what they
scream.
do is they take a vacuum, and I don't suggest you watch it. I don't suggest anybody watch it,
Right,
but
right.
it's out there. You can get it on the internet. But basically, imagine you have a I don't know baby, limbs, and they'll go in with a vacuum and basically suck a leg off or rip a leg off. They do it both ways, and when it starts to pull, you can see the baby's mouth open and like as if it's screaming. Like you can't hear the scream, but you can see it's starting to rip the leg off because you got to get all the parts outside of the woman. Otherwise, it creates infection, like decaying. Well, once again, decaying.
No,
This wasn't my point. I wasn't going to make this, but I think it's valid.
no, I
It
understand. I
dies and
understand.
it starts to decay because there's no more animus. But anyway, that was a wink. That was a little nudge in the ribs. But anyway, that's
No,
what was going on.
right, right. But that that's my problem with it is that unfortunately, like yeah, it does. It looks horrible. It looks just heart wrenching to see that. And
I'm sure it does. I've
as
never seen it, but I'd imagine it would be.
as a dad, I mean, I don't want to. I hate it when people say that. Like especially as a lefty California liberal. I hate when I hear conservatives say, "As a husband and as a son of a woman, I respect women." Like,
Right, right.
just as a person, you can do it. Like,
Yeah, right.
as a
Just
person,
that value
it can
of they
break
have.
my heart to see.
Yeah.
You know, but as
Sorry, that was funny. I
but
had to
as a
lean off screen to laugh. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
it's okay.
Yeah, you're right.
But no, as a
You're a person.
person,
Yeah.
yeah, as a person, but even as a dad, like, yeah, it's heart wrenching to think of that. But do we do we definitively know that that's what it is? And God, I hate to ask that question. I sincerely do, because like it's like asking, like, if it's like asking, does the bull feel it when the matador pokes him? Like, d does he feel this? Is he feeling this? Like that's what it feels like saying. Like, if am I actually seeing a
Oh,
baby feel
oh.
pain, or am I just seeing a natural response from an unconscious being? I feel like I'm asking, like, as I'm poking a bull, does he feel this? Like, and it feels heartless to say that, but at the same time, I do we know that that's what we're seeing? And it really hurts to ask that, but when we're talking about how much of a woman's life we're dictating over this discussion, it needs to be asked. I feel as though it does need to be asked, and there's and you're to your point, yeah, that is it is it is it is heartbreaking that that does have to happen. And I'm not just saying in the case of an abortion, but in the case of a stillbirth. I know that um, there was I can't remember the official term, but I believe that one of the nickname or one of the colloquial names for it, translated to English, was like stone baby syndrome. And it's when it's happened before, where a woman will she won't be she like the baby will pass,
Yeah.
but the woman can't get the fetus out, and so the body, to protect itself, calcifies the fetus to basically keep it from actually leaching anything negative back into the woman's
I
body
didn't hear
that
that.
that could harm her. And I know that there's been instance there. The reason I mentioned this, there was an article I read of a woman, I believe she was in Mexico, that she was suffering from severe abdominal pain in her 70s, and it turned out that's what it was. But she had a
Oh,
stillbirth that she never was able to pass, and the body calcified inside of her. And unfortunately, that same procedure that you're describing, that's what would have needed to have happened to avoid that woman, to avoid that happening to that woman. It would have been that same procedure, because you have to remember that that woman can never have another baby after that, because occupied. Her uterus was already occupied.
oh, whoa, whoa. You just once. Okay, I'm gonna interrupt you real quick. Once again, I had to chew a laugh back because, as sad as that is, this woman couldn't give birth because the womb was occupied. But that's the military humor. I was like, that's a good. That's what you said. I was like, I'll try not to laugh. So I made a face. I apologize, but it is. Whenever I don't know
No,
if you
no,
like
I understand what you're saying.
Roger, if you're in the company of other vets, do you happen does your mind go back to that little bit of a twisted, warped? Like, if I was having this same conversation with someone who I didn't know from the battalion, I that would have never thought
Right.
that. But because I'm talking to you, it's just the back of my head. Sorry. So if I laughed, I apologize.
No, no,
But yeah, it's
yeah,
occupied.
I completely
That's a shame though.
understand. But yeah, and that's the heartbreaking thing, is that it's heartbreaking to imagine her having to experience that, and then to pile
Yeah.
on to that the fact that this deny for the rest of her life, she had no idea that this is what was
Yeah.
denying her from being a mother again. And then on top of all that, I feel disgusting to ask, but would we have seen the same thing if we had to if we did the same procedure to avoid her calcifying a
Oh,
baby inside
like
her
before
uterus?
it's
I mean, what?
pre-calcified, it's what is the reaction of a stillbirth? These are good questions. I mean, honestly, and I'm sure for the stillbirth, I don't know. These are good questions. I mean, you raised some very curious things. Hold on one second. Since we're on air and it's just, I'm sorry, I'm an ocean inspector now, so usually I'm like, I ask a question, I'm like, all right, shut up so I can write this down, and there's just dead silence as they're awkward as I'm asking these questions. Why'd you use that letter to do this work? Anyway, so
Right.
what I'm writing down is, does a stillborn fetus respond to the vacuum
Differently.
stimuli? Would that be a good summary of
Good
what you were saying
summation.
or the question we had? Yeah.
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
good questions. I mean, I'd be interested. I'm interested in these things too. And to seek truth is to. I know you're a utilitarian. You said something earlier, and it was like five
Uh,
times.
so the short term is UU.
You're the University of Utah.
Unitarian Universalist.
Okay. Oh, Universalist. Oh, so all right. So that actually is interesting too. I think no, never mind. I was thinking utilitarianism.
It's a
That's
Catholic
something.
root.
What?
The Universalist part of it is actually a Catholic root.
No, yeah.
You
Well,
know
Catholic
better
means
than me
universal.
about this. What was that?
Catholic is a Greek word for universal.
But the doctrine of universal salvation, I believe it was, that either
Yes,
all
that would be Catholic
humans
as
are
well.
born with sin or without sin. Uh,
Maybe
this
I'm
is
thinking
that's
two separate.
that discussion. Well, no, that either everybody is born with the original sin and therefore they
Yes.
have to atone, their life has to be atoning, or the other side of that argument was, hey, you don't necessarily inherit sin. Maybe that, hey, you're actually born without sin, and that's life that draws you away, that draws you towards the sin.
Oh,
And the universalists were actually the ones who said everybody was born without sin, so you don't really need to atone, just don't be a jerk. And then as time went on, they also attached the Unitarian side of it, and basically, like I said in our discussion, the every member of every faith is going to say that. At least, I'm trying to think of
okay.
how to
All
say
right.
this
I'm
without
gonna
committing a
stop you. I'm gonna
fallacy.
stop you. I'm gonna stop you right there because we're gonna go on a
Sorry,
tangent
go ahead.
about which we already covered,
Yeah.
by the way. If you're interested, you can look at our direct message that you do not have access to. What was I gonna say? Now I forgot the thing I was gonna say about the. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Sorry about
Whatever
that.
it was. It was probably going to be a sarcastic comment. No, it was actually a real point. I just can't remember what it was. But anyway, so yeah, these are good things. I just think it's a shame that these are not being discussed. When I go around
Right.
Facebook, and I refuse to have an argument with somebody on Facebook over abortion because it is just raw anger and hatred from both sides,
Right.
and it's
Right.
insane. But I mean, I think these are valid questions. I think at least needs to be discussed. Yes, we had an understanding of things, and science was something back and then, for a long time, and DNA was ground changing for everything, for whether you're criminal justice, whether you know what I mean, whether it be life, whether it be
Hmm.
DNA genes. I mean, it was a game changer. It really was, and it's
Right.
not applied to this argument, and I think it's very. I think it's a mistake not to logically discuss this. So I appreciate you taking the time, sir. This whole hour and 8 minutes, it was
No.
supposed to be 30 minutes, but somebody had to drag on
Sorry
and on
about that.
talking about Simpsons and Futurama. Oh, I was talking about me, but sure, we can blame you. I'm okay with it. Uh, Closing thoughts. Anything you want to add? Anything you want to say?
um. Just like we said before, when we one of the things that we talked about in our direct messages, or that we talked about was, don't let language fail you, and because that's one of the problems is that, like, basically we are having an argument right now, but we're
Mhm.
having an honest argument. We're discussing, and like we said earlier, the I think you said was the Aristotle approach was that in a true argument, both interlocutors walk away with a better understanding.
Well, you said that. I
Whereas in
disagreed.
English we have, okay, but
I don't
whereas
want to
with
be called
English
a
we have,
liar in front of all five of our viewers.
but the thing is that we have 7 different definitions for every word,
Yeah.
and so when people hear argument, they think brawl, with words, and And that's not what it's supposed to be, and that's not what a debate is supposed to be. That's none of that does any good for anything.
As a matter
And
of fact,
so
oh, go ahead, keep going. I just
no,
realized
and
something.
so
I'm gonna end at that. I'm gonna add something to that. I'm sorry to say. I hope it's okay.
go
If it's
ahead.
wrong, let me know. But on that note, I actually have to go teach a class to some friends of mine. She wanted her both of them. They're the father and mother. One of them works with our kind of is one of our consigliaries in for the Catholic Misfit, where none of us are Italian, but I'll steal that term from The Godfather. Um, but what I'm teaching them, we're doing a lot. We're doing philosophy classes about this, and right now is our first class on syllogisms and building an argument, how to logically set out terms and ideas so that you can express them in such a way that not only do they make sense, but it is not emotional. It is just saying,
Right,
here it is. Is this right or wrong? What do you think? You tell me, and we express it back and forth. So it's interesting.
right,
You're talking about
yeah,
what
and
I'm going to teach in about 5 minutes.
but that's and that's what people I wish more people would understand is that like we I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to understand that violence doesn't really solve anything because all you're doing is you're telling somebody to stay quiet until you leave.
I'm still
And
learning that,
that's
but
like,
I know it in my head, not my heart.
well, and same here, and same here,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's one of the, but that's one thing that I wish that I think the world would be a much better place if we were mature enough to, if all of us were mature enough to actually say, no, no, like I'm not trying to call you Satan. I'm not trying to say that you're a horrible person.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand this for myself. And it seems that you and I both have different understandings. So let's see where our differences come from, and let's
That's
actually
also
have that
very
discussion. And
that's very Socrates, by the way. That explanation. I just want to understand this. Like,
but
why are you
that's
getting mad? I'm asking a question.
right. But at the same time, like, and that's what's so frustrating about it is that we need to have that Socratic discussion about so many things that are just rooted in violence and hatred and anger and just distrust. And I just one of the things that, because I mean I used to consider myself quite a religious person, and I kind of fell away from that. And part of the one of the things that I came to realize was that I would really rather put my faith in people than in something that I can't quantify, because I know that the person's going to let me down, and in my experience, people let me down just as much as any book has, and but at least I have a chance to talk with them about it. And you remember that, if you remember to have to at least, you can put faith where you want to put it, but just remember that you got to live with people. So if you can, try and put some faith in people, because nobody is going out there wanting to be the bad guy. Nobody is wanting to be Nobody's wanting to be evil.
Right.
And so you're not talking with somebody who's evil. You're talking with somebody who just doesn't see it your way. And that's I wish that's what everybody would learn, is just that, I
Well,
guess.
I think that's a great. I mean, there's a reason why we started out this thing by saying, pointing out, you do not want to walk into a nursery with an M16 and just start mowing kids down,
Exactly.
right? That is not your intention. You just see things
Yeah,
from a different
exactly.
way, and that's what we fail to realize, recognize. I agree. There's too much anger, and for the record, to right at the start of this conversation, I invited Roger. I mean, the direct messaging thing over Facebook. I invited him to direct message me about something we were talking about. I said, because I know you won't, you're logical enough. You're not going to be screaming and yelling at me, and it's not going to be a fight. And your response
Right.
to that was you direct messaged me and said, well, I'm only doing this because when I read your posts or anything you're talking about with religion, you don't see that I'm doing that. I'm not berating people. I respect their opinion, and I'm just trying to
Right.
maintain a conversation. And if two schmoes who have opposite political views can do this, why can't any of you on either side of the aisle? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. and that's what's frustrating is like I've had discussions like this before, and it's always it can be with anybody from any background, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I know where you're from. I know what you've been. I know some of what you've been through.
Mhm.
I wasn't there for all of it. I wasn't. I didn't know you at Seton Hall, but I knew you before that. And at at the end of the day, like you and I, we're not the smartest guys in the world, but we at least we can talk.
Yeah.
You know, at, and the people that we put in charge of everything, like I hate this because like it feels. I just wish our parents could talk again. Like
Like what?
I wish mommy and daddy could just. I wish mommy
Oh
and
yeah.
daddy could talk again without yelling.
Yeah.
But but really, I mean that's what it is. In this day and age, it's just like, well, I don't have to listen to you. Well, I don't have to listen to you. Well, I'm going to keep talking. Well, I'm going to keep talking, and
Yeah.
just it gets so loud. It just gets so dang loud. So
Right. So thank you with that. We will end it. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you for taking the
thank you.
leap of faith to trust that we would respect your opinion here at the Catholic Misfit. Thank you very much, sir. Have a
Appreciate it. I
wonderful,
appreciate it. Thank
wonderful
you.
afternoon.
You too.